The Summer I Turned Pretty is a show that is really suffering from the end of a 22-episode season being common, but it's also really heavily benefiting from the way that fandom works in the modern age, as well as the access that everyone has to the source material. One of the biggest struggles about The Summer I Turned Pretty is the fact that the writers really just don't have enough time to fully flesh out two full-blown relationships, as well as work in all the other family dynamics, the ancillary relationships that are not the main focus of the show, and of course the overall trauma that these characters are going through outside of their relationships. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about that is the fact that the social media element of this is a lot of the fandom trying to actively fill in the gaps for viewers that necessarily didn't read the books. Those gaps are the things that the adaptation necessarily cuts out of the books because of the change in medium, as well as not having enough screen time. And I think one of the reasons why this really crystallized for me was the lead up of everyone trying to figure out which episode we were going to see certain scenes happen, and the fact that we finally got into the episode where Conrad finds out that Jeremiah cheated on Belly, and where he declares his love to Belly as well. Whether or not you read the books, if you're online interacting with content, you're well aware of where the story was going, and quite frankly, a lot of the dialogue that ended up in the show. Because for weeks now, we've been seeing people sharing the audiobook and sharing that scene, even acting it out. And then when we finally get to that scene, it's not necessarily as surprising as one would expect it to be. But what I really found interesting was how many people are sharing the actual dialogue from the book, trying to explain where Belly's character was coming from. And the idea that a lot of people didn't get that emotion or that understanding from the scene where directly after this, Belly falls to the ground and starts sobbing. And it's this weird kind of dichotomy, because I think if the writers and the actors were given 22 episodes like we used to have, we may have gotten a lot more of that source material that works so well into an on-screen adaptation. And they could have maybe made a show that perhaps feels a little bit less painful to watch when we're talking about the way these characters are interacting with each other. But also, I do think that social media as a whole and the way that the fandom is reacting to it is not only helping fill in those gaps, but is also very much building up the anticipation of the show as well as the popularity of it. Because since we're getting a week-to-week model with this, which has not been typical for streaming lately, we're also week-to-week getting a full amount of discourse about the show that not only holds you over and gets you excited for next week, but for weeks has been previewing the exact dialogue of this big romantic scene, and now is using the source material to kind of justify every character's reaction, whether or not the show itself would have gotten that across alone. Personally, I would just prefer to see a 22-episode season return and be able to see what this show would look like, what these relationship dynamics would look like on screen if they were given enough time to really breathe. So I'm curious how you feel the show is doing in terms of making you understand all of these characters, and how you felt about the actual Conrad confession scene and Belly's reaction. And also, I do want to point out that the marketing may personally just be getting to me, because I started watching this show because of a fan edit that compared the love triangle in The Summer I Turned Pretty to the love triangle in The Vampire Diaries. And I'm gonna make a part 2 explaining why that dynamic is just not the same here, so be sure to follow